Hi, my name is Darlene Bancroft. I'm an occupational therapist for Plymouth Public Schools. I've been in Plymouth for 10 years now. I have 20 years experience in the public school setting. I've also worked in outpatient pediatrics, and I've worked with students from birth all the way through high school. Predominantly, I guess my favorite place to be is kindergarten, but I'm loving being in the preschool too the last few weeks. It's been great. But I do think I have a pretty good grasp on what our kindergartners are needing these days. And again, I will go back to the Handwriting Without Tears program is one of my best programs that I have available. And I'm hoping to share that with you as our weeks go by. And I guess first I want to go over, what is OT? And one of the definitions I like to share is that the term occupational therapy comes from the term to occupy, which means that OTs pretty much work on anything that occupies your time, which sometimes can be even more confusing when I go to give my definition. But we do, to clarify, especially in the schools, occupational therapists do specialize in upper limb development, including hands, visual perceptual skills, which would work on things such as puzzle building and be able to perceive things visually within your mind, and visual motor skills, which when you bring your visual perceptual and fine motor skills together simultaneously. So an example would be like cueing a student to draw a square or to write a letter, which, if that makes sense, that's why OTs are often times involved with handwriting with students, especially when they are struggling to write. Given that all I know about the Handwriting Without Tears program, which was developed by an occupational therapist, again, as I mentioned, I think a lot of great thought was put into the program. It started with Jan Olson was the creator of it. Her son came home from kindergarten. He was crying, and she said, "There's a problem here." And she went on to develop and work from her head and her heart at the same time. And it's been a program that I think that it's working nicely to prepare kids for the rigors of kindergarten, but also keeping child development in mind as they progress through all the stages of learning. So here's my turtle. I want you to think of this, and I love this term: no good things are done in a hurry. Child development can be slow and arduous at times, and depending on the child, I mean, they could get stuck. They can become stuck in stages, and that's okay. There could be hundreds of reasons why, and then all of a sudden they have an incredible day, an incredible week, and an incredible month. I've had kids that have incredible summers. They come back and just things wondrously appear. It's amazing. And patience is a true thing that I try to keep in mind as I'm working with students. And I think especially as my years have gone on, I've definitely learned to be more patient. It's easy to say, of course, and we have all these demands for our kids to learn, but I think we have to keep in mind of keeping kids at that just right challenge. To me, it's very important. Especially, we can even look at the more global picture of just mental health for children. If we're asking them to do too many things that are beyond their developmental level for hours at a time, for days at a time, for months at a time, they can get worn down. And not having success is hard, over and over again. And we don't want that to happen. I especially don't want it to happen. And I'm hoping I can give you some guidance and some reminders of thinking about child development while we're trying to teach them some of those good basic skills that they're going to forever have in their education. So if you think about Handwriting Without Tears program, there's a whole bunch of stages, as I mentioned. It starts right at that very early preschool level, and it goes all the way through cursive. Of course, we're not going to talk about cursive yet. Not. We're not there yet. We're going to talk about the early stages of informal handwriting versus formal handwriting. So if we look on the right-hand side here, we're looking at the formal handwriting instruction that happens in kindergarten. And the big thing I want to point out is that's when the pencils really start. Before that, we're looking at more like that multi-sensory learning. We're going to talk about like singing songs out. Of course, we have our wooden pieces, the HYT pieces that we're going to be using to build and create our Matman to draw a person. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next few slides. But it's all about that first phase of learning. That's probably our preschool level. And then our pre-K level is getting into the phase 2, and the child development varies. I know there's a huge, we're going to go over some slides later. There's a huge variance of our kids based on just who they are genetically, what they've been exposed to, how much they're willing to try, their setting that they're developing in, and, the toys that are available for them. There's a whole huge variety of factors of what causes kids to develop in the way they do. And sometimes it's just time. As I mentioned, let's think about the turtle again. And we want to keep that in mind as we're going through all our good phases. So as I mentioned, here's phase 1 versus phase 2. And as you see, when we get into phase 2, that's when we're going to start using our fine motor skills. You see phase 1 is like the songs and getting acquainted with the wooden pieces and then assembling Matman. And as we move on to phase 2, we're going to go in more into bringing that visual motor and fine motor development into place. It's going from left to right. So as we go along and we learn about using our wooden pieces to make Matman, which are eventually going to be able to form our uppercase letters, with the exception of U and J. You can do it, but it's really not going to fit on the mat correctly. And they're kind of the exceptions, and also the number 6. But everything else we can form, all our numbers we can form. And the number 8's not the best number to make on there, but it can be done. I just want to reiterate, as we go on to the end of phase 2, we're doing a lot of the wet, dry, try technique, and they're going to be tracing involved while we're using a tool. So I'm going to show a quick video. Hopefully this link's right, and let's give it a whirl, and we'll show you how the wet, try technique works. And that's the very end of the phase 2 of the handwriting program, which we'll go into phase 3. We're going to do a little bit of background about fine motor development. So I mentioned before we go on to phase 3, we're going to be looking at fine motor development, because that's also going to be happening at the same time. So this is going to be when we start looking at holding our crayon, hopefully not our pencil, hopefully our crayon, our broken crayon, and chalk and other forms of writing tools. And we're going to hopefully be at this lower phase. We want kids to be down here when we go into phase 3. And as again, we know there's a huge variance. I have some of the labels here on this. The earliest stages, we go into a fisted grasp, and then we go into a digital grasp. And then I wanted to go over a little bit. Hopefully the video is going to be able to pick it up. We have 2 sides of our hand, right? We have over here is our skilled sides, our radial side. Our radius is on this side. We have 2 bones, radius and ulna. Radius is on this side, ulna is on this side. This side of our hand is actually our power side. And I was wondering if we could try, if you put your hand like this and just use these 2 fingers and look down at your forearm, and you'll see down here, you'll see these big muscles. This is called our power side. We have these 2 little fingers are actually designed for holding big tools, like what I like using the example of hammering with a hammer, right? Because that's attached. These fingers are attached to nice big muscles down here. A lot of the insertions, I can get into like nerdy OT, anatomy and physiology. A lot of the insertions and origins and how the movement of this side of the hand, they're actually all within the hand. They're the small little muscles that make all that precision. So when you start having these two fingers as part of your writing, can you think about why they would not be good? Right? They're not designed to do nice little small precision movements. They're designed for big, powerful things. And that, if that makes sense. So when you get into habits of not using your thumb, sometimes we get kids into, I don't have a pencil nearby, thumb wraps and power grasp, and they're using their wrist and they're using these fingers. It's all going to snowball eventually to lack the ability to really write with precision. And they're going to compensate. If your kid's too young and they're holding a pencil incorrectly, a lot of times I'll say to teachers, take the pencil away. There's a reason why we don't give kids under 16 a car. They're probably, good things aren't going to happen. They're not yet. We don't want to have bad habits because they're really hard to break. And I promise you, it's really hard. And some kids maybe are destined to just need scaffolding and compensation in the long term in order to hold correctly or with function. Maybe they are going to need pencil grips and adaptations, but hopefully they won't. And by keeping all that good development in place and keeping things at the just right challenge and not giving them a good full-size writing tool until they're ready and that full size. So I started talking about the two sides of the hand. So when you're starting to hold a tool, if you see how on that bottom picture down here, see how there's a third finger? I don't get too nervous when the third finger's in that, when you're in that position, you're resting your hand. So when you want the two side of the hand, we want this side to be the stabilizer, right? We want these pinky and this finger to be resting. If the ring finger is on the writing tool, it's not the end of the world. I don't panic because usually that third finger can get back in time within some practice and range. But especially where I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but when you're handwriting, when you're writing it with the tool especially, we really want the stabilizer side of the hand, that power side, we want it to be resting on the paper. And then we want this part, that's what we call a dynamic tripod grasp. That's when it happens. When this part of the hand moves on its own and this side stabilizes. Because then we can write and it can balance and it can stabilize and rest rather than using your wrist to write. I want to say it one more time. Two sides of the hand. This stabilizes. This is for resting on the paper. This side's for moving. So I'm going to rest this here, and this part's going to move. And that way we're using all the little muscles inside our hand and not using all this big, powerful stuff, which makes our hand get tired. This is what our hand's designed for with tools. So effective tool use, like I mentioned, I have a little video again. Hopefully it'll explain it. I do think this is the heart, the heart and soul of handwriting development, of fine motor development to write is right here. And as the months go on, I hope to give you tons of ideas and things that we can put for centers to help develop all this skill side use. Like my next favorite thing to do is cutting with scissors. For me, that's one of the best ways to work on effective pencil grip, believe it or not. And, we can work on beads and all kinds of other good fun, stuff to do if we're not seeing progression with the fine motor and that skill side. This is our goal, and we're going to find ways to get there. Hope that helps. All right, moving on. So phase 3, once we get that good grasping pattern or somewhere to the bottom half of that, those examples that I showed you, then we can move on to phase 3. that's usually the general guidance that the program and most occupational therapists will tell you, hopefully. And here's the Get Set for School book, which is a crayon-based book for pre-K students. And here's the introduction to the curves and lines. As we know, we've used the big curve and little curve to make Matman's head and mouth and ears and all that good stuff. As I mentioned, those pieces are going to become the pieces that are going to form our uppercase letters, as well as our numbers. There are some exceptions. The U and the J, you're not supposed to. You can do it, but it won't fit on the mat correctly. And the numbers 6 and 8, all other letters and numbers can work. So if I'm going to give the example of how to make a D, I'm going to say the letters, the stroke pattern from left to right, top to bottom. So when you make a D, it would be big line, big curve. If I was going to make the letter P, I would say big line, little curve. If I was going to make an uppercase R, the cues I would say are big line, little curve, little line. And that is super simple, hopefully, and everyone would have consistent cueing. We're going to have lots of practice making Matman, so you're going to be able to get the concept. We're going to talk in the next few slides about all the good things Matman teaches us and gives us all that good pre-readiness practice before we start making our uppercase letters. And just another example on here is here's the blue mat for Matman. That's why he's called Matman. He comes with that blue mat. That's his body, is the second phase after we learn how to make his head. And then under here is the example of the practice mats that we're going to have too, that we're going to be able, the kids at the earliest stages are going to learn to match the pieces to form the letters. So there's that visual perceptual part that I talked about, what occupational therapists do in the schools. This is phase 1, because you're getting that perception. What does the letter look like? What does it feel like, right? We're actually using that multisensory. We're touching the pieces and feeling them. And we're using the concepts of our body. As I go forward, I'll jump ahead. What Matman does, the concept of my body is the big line, right, is my leg, and the little line is my foot. Well, I know my leg is bigger than my foot. And the same thing with my head. My head is bigger than my ear. So I'm going to need big curves for my head. I'm going to need little curves for my ear. And as I was been teaching Matman's face, I've been really picky. I want kids to start at their eyes and go down. I want to work on that sequencing piece, because that's going to be really important once we start forming letters, of being able to do sequential patterns and to get that practice of first, next, then, and be able to hold on to that and to endure it and to go follow through with it. So that's the sequencing, the body awareness, since I mentioned. I like also adding even a belly button. The belly button matches, that tells us where the middle is. That's especially important when we go to look at lowercase letters. Not quite yet, of course, but that's going to be another important concept for kids to learn for position and space of top, middle, and bottom. And we want kids to start at the top, and you need to know where the top is in order to do that. We tell the kids to start at the top. They don't know where top is. Well, it's going to happen. They're not going to start in the right spot. And also, this is just practice for making curves and lines, just that fine motor exposure and development and practice. I would love for kids to draw Matman every day or so for at least a month. And you can only get better at it. And then encourage them, once they learn all these basic parts, have them add more details. You could draw hair. I also mentioned, you could do snipping with scissors and add hair that way. You could put them in a setting. Is it a sunny day? Is it rainy? We go over the weather every morning. Have Matman, draw the weather. What would it look like? What would his setting be? These are all. All right, this Matman. So here's some examples of how Matman intervention could help. There's the belly button. There's all the nice details in the sequencing that you can see from the student over here on the after side. Here's another example of the lack of body awareness on the left, and probably sequencing to be able to start from the top. And once you learn where the ears are, hopefully you don't end up with, we call these, I've called them meatball people, but I guess potato head is the same. Potato really doesn't have he has a head and a body, and I get it. That's okay. It's not the end of the world, but it's just working on that top to bottom, left to right, visual planning, body awareness, and all that good stuff that hopefully is going to lend to better handwriting as we go on. And we're just about done. I just wanted to go over some developmentally appropriate visual motor. So as I mentioned, OTs work on visual perceptual skills. We work on fine motor skills. And when we bring those two skills together, it's called visual motor development. The Berry VMI is a special fancy tool that we use. It's very easy to give for OTs. It's the gold standard. There's also a variety of other tools that we've for standardized testing that we use. And a lot of times it goes back to these shapes. These norms do not change usually over time. This is what is expected in general for kids. So if we look at 2 to 3 year olds, they're going to be at that drawer face. You know how we're starting with Matman and we're drawing a circle to make his head? That's going to hit all our earliest development for our students. As the kids go on in age, and I know there's a variety. Some kids, we have 3-year-olds that can do 6-year-old things, and we have 6-year-olds that can probably barely hold a crayon. So that's okay. So, there's not exact right or wrong, but I just want to give the norms and standards. And I also want to point out, you might not be 6 until you can draw a triangle. And that, for me, that's the big hurdle. If I see a student who cannot draw a triangle, how would I expect them to make an uppercase A? Just want to point that out. We have 6-year-olds that can't make a triangle, but yet we expect them to write lowercase letters, which is well beyond what can be expected for some kids within the general developmental norms. So I want to put that out there. I'm going to bring it back to guess who? The turtle, right? We want to think about the Just Right challenge. We want to think a lot about phase 2. Remember all that good multisensory stuff that we can do with Play-Doh? We can use our wooden pieces, right? We can use lots of scaffolding. And we want our kids to engage without kind of falling apart and breaking down. I want to get on my little soapbox about kid mental health, right? To me, that's really why I love this program. I want our kids to feel good about what they're learning. They're doing the best they can. We are doing the best we can. But I also want to think about our Just Right challenge. And I want us to stay there to keep our kids engaged and to be the best learners they can be. Thanks so much for your time, and I'm looking forward to more learning with you as we go. Take care. Bye.